Good afternoon. If I could have your attention, please. Good afternoon and welcome to the National Press Club. I'm Mark Hamrick, a broadcast journalist for Associated Press, and I am still asking for the attention of the people in the far corners. I am the 104th president of the National Press Club. We are the world's leading professional organization for journalists, committed to our profession's future through our programming, events such as this, while also trying to foster a free press worldwide. For more information about the National Press Club, please visit our website at www.press.org, and to donate to programs offered to the public through our Eric Friedheim National Journalism Library, please visit www.press.org/library. On behalf of our members worldwide, I'd like to welcome our speakers and those of you attending today's event. We have a full house. Our head table includes guests of our speakers as well as working journalists who are club members. And if you hear applause in our audience, I'd remind you that members of the general public are in attendance, and we're grateful for that, but it is not necessarily evidence of a lack of journalistic objectivity. I'd also like to welcome our C-SPAN and public radio audiences. Our luncheons are also featured on our member-produced weekly podcast from the National Press Club, available on iTunes. You can also follow the action on Twitter using the hashtag #NPCLunch. After our guests' speeches conclude, we'll have Q&A, and I will ask as many questions as time permits. Now it's time to introduce our head table guests, and I would ask each of you here to stand up briefly as your name is announced, and we'll begin from your right. Beginning with Charlie Leoka. He is editorial director with Consumer Travel Alliance. Bill Loveless, host of Platts Energy Week. Joe Rothstein, or Stein, chairman of EINnews.com. Alan Bjerga, agriculture reporter, Bloomberg News, and my immediate predecessor as NPC president. Then we're graced by the presence by Mrs. Madeline Pickens, wife of Mr. Pickens. Marilyn G. Wax, senior business editor with National Public Radio and vice chair of our Speakers Committee. We'll skip over our guests and myself. Melissa Charbonneau, Newshook Media, chair of our Speakers Committee. Kate Michael, K Street Kate, as she's known in the internet, Speakers Committee member who organized today's event, and thank you, Kate. Elizabeth Dewberry is guest of Mr. Turner. Thank you for being here today. Suzanne Struglinski, press secretary at the Natural Resources Defense Council. Mike Sorhan, energy reporter for Greenwire and an NPC board member. Robert Yoon is political research director for CNN. And Tom Doggett, energy policy reporter for Reuters. Please give them a round of applause. Well, our guests today are a pair of businessmen turned philanthropists coming to us with a plea and also a pledge for movement toward alternative energy sources. Ted Turner, founder of such familiar names in television as TBS and CNN, the chairman of Ted Turner Enterprises, has been devoted to environmental causes, politically and financially present in the alternative fuels debate. He's developing a message for people of all ages on the importance of rescuing the planet. He's also taking on solar energy projects, and he's personally making the rounds to speak to students in colleges where he tells them that the environment is the most difficult challenge the world will face, more important than Iraq in his words, and he's even gone so far as to appeal to youth with an animated series called Captain Planet and the Planeteers. Mr. Turner says opportunities in clean energy technology remind him of cable news back before he developed CNN. He's putting his money where his mouth is with a multi-million-dollar stake in First Solar, the world's largest maker of thin-film solar power modules. And he has more than a passing interest in the wind business as well, which many might think would put him in a bit of competition with his friend and our fellow luncheon speaker, Boone Pickens, but we'll ask them to hash that out here on the stage. Mr. Turner's habit of speaking freely once earned him some nicknames like Mouth of the South and Captain Outrageous, such as the time on the Charlie Rose Show in 2008, in which he said if steps were not taken to address global warming, most of us people will have died and the rest of us will be cannibals. He's the largest private landowner in the United States. and he's owned the largest bison herd and founded a restaurant chain serving burgers with bison meat. I understand some are conveniently located here in the Washington area. Boone Pickens, whose background as an oil man makes him a self-declared, in his words, surprising environmentalist, currently chairs BP Capital Management. And he's returning, like Mr. Turner, to our Luncheon series today to give us an update on his energy policy proposal called the Pickens Plan, which calls for a reduction in U.S. dependency on foreign energy, particularly oil, through the introduction of various alternatives. And he's telling us today that he believes the plan has a very good chance of passage with the support of President Obama. At one time, announcing his intention to build the world's largest wind farm, a project said to have been postponed due to financing and other setbacks, his company is now betting largely on natural gas as an alternative for transportation. He's been named one of the world's most influential people by Time magazine and the American Wind Energy Association's 2009 Industry Person of the Year. He gained the endorsement of the Sierra Club and has written 2 New York Times bestsellers. He spent some $62 million of his personal wealth to support the plan and also has enlisted people in his Pickens Army. Boone writes in his book, The First Billion is the Hardest, that his biggest beef with the government remains that the U.S. has not adopted any strategy for incorporating alternative energy sources. Our speaker's overlapping interests include sports. Mr. Turner was owner of the Atlanta Braves, said to have been a hands-on owner. He founded the Goodwill Games and was skipper who successfully defended the America's Cup for the United States. Mr. Pickens has given hundreds of millions of dollars to Oklahoma State University, tells me he doesn't miss a football game, and that includes the largest single donation to a university's collegiate athletic program in history. Both are signatories to the Giving Pledge, a campaign to encourage the nation's wealthiest individuals to promise to give most of their money to charity. And while Mr. Turner is known for founding CNN, which changed the face of television news, they both also share a background in journalism. Both delivered newspapers as boys. Before we turn things over to Mr. Turner, I'd like to note also that tomorrow is the 1-year anniversary of the Deepwater Horizon explosion, which led to the BP oil spill. Please give a warm National Press Club welcome to both of our speakers, and Mr. Turner will begin.
My main concern is the survival of the human race. And as important as I think as clean renewable energy is, as part of that, I don't put it as number one. I'd say the existence and danger of nuclear weapons is the greatest danger that we face. And a top priority is to get rid of them as quickly as possible. I mean, I'm not talking about nuclear power. That's a whole nother issue. I'm talking about the weapons that, like the one we dropped on Hiroshima, where it killed 250,000 people in one day, and then later at Nagasaki. And we can get rid of those weapons. The Security Council of the UN voted last year unanimously to get rid of them, but what we need is implementation. And we're lacking in that at the current time. It is complicated, but it's real simple too. Just get rid of all of them. That's the only way it's going to work. It's not going to work for us to have 2,000 nuclear weapons in Iraq to have 2. You know, that's that won't work. We've got to all get rid of them at the same time. The second tremendous challenge that we face is the growth in human population numbers. There are just too many people in the world right now with 7 billion. 1 billion of us already live in hunger and deprivation. And if we add, as is predicted, another billion over the next 10 years to 8 billion, and then 9 billion over the next 20 years after that, we'll have 3 billion people that are starving. And we just really have to get serious about family planning. It needs to be voluntary, in my opinion. If we can't restrain our numbers voluntarily, then maybe we don't deserve to be here. If we had to have laws and penalties for having children, I don't think that would be good. The third challenge that we face that is overwhelming is the environment, the whole issue of the environment, not just the energy policy, which is the most important thing right now under the environmental heading. But the oceans are collapsing from overfishing. The rangeland all over the world is endangered by desertification and over farming and farming in an unsustainable way. And we have to straighten out our care of the environment. And cutting back on the growth in human numbers is the most important thing we can do, because the more of us there are, the more pressure that's put on the environment. And then, next, but very important, is clean renewable energy. I think we need to move very quickly. Boone's going to talk about natural gas. I subscribe to it as a bridge fuel. Particularly, I also do feel that the fracking situation, we have to feel better about that and make sure that it's not too environmentally damaging. But clean renewable energy, I foresee 20 years from now a world where there is no more fossil fuel, where it's not being used anymore. We say goodbye to it. It served us well for several hundred years since the Industrial Revolution, but it's time to move on to clean renewable energy, and for economic reasons too, because in the end it's going to be the least expensive, because it's basically free. And as part of clean renewable energy, we need a modern grid. We need a modern energy system, and that's clean renewables. And what's the natural gas as a bridge fuel probably. And we'll have a world without pollution. That'll be pretty amazing, won't it? I mean, it'll be, our kids won't be getting asthma, and we won't have all these bronchial infections, and it'll be quiet, because the cars will be electric. It's going to be a real nice world. I hope I live long enough to see it, and I hope you do too, because if we don't do it, we're not going to live very long anyway. So we're either going to do it or we're going to die. It's very simple. Thank you very much.
Go ahead, Boone.
I want to talk about energy security for America. We've gone 40 years in this country, and we've had no energy plan, zero. We're the largest country in the world. We're the only country in the world without an energy plan. We have used more fuel than any other country in the world. Today, there's 88 million barrels of oil produced every day in the world, and we're using 21 million of it. So we're almost 25% of all the oil used every day, and we have 4% of the population. Well, you know, serious, if you look at that, we're using 25% with 4% of the population. We could be the cause of $100 oil. We're way out of balance with the rest of the world. We have no energy plan, 40 years, no plan. Why? Because we had cheap oil. That was it. Neither party, Republican or Democrat, ever had an energy plan. Somebody explained to me the other day, said, that's an obvious bipartisan effort to not do anything. And maybe so. They didn't want to tackle it. It's time to tackle it now, because we're at a critical point. If we go forward 10 years like we have operated for the last 40 years, in 10 years from now, you'll pay $300, $400 a barrel for the oil, and we'll be importing 75% of our oil at that point. Today, we're importing 66% and $100 oil. So in 10 years, it's all it's going to take to get you to that point. Why? Because oil is a finite resource, and it's running out. So when we look at the fourth quarter of this year, so you're going to be able to check whether Boone knows what he's talking about or not, that in the fourth quarter of this year, demand is projected for 90 million barrels a day. And I don't think that the world can produce 90 million. If they can't, the only way you can kill demand is with price. So price is going to go up. It will kill demand, and that will go forward with demand that will be in balance with supply. Okay, do we have resources in America to take care of ourselves? Absolutely do have. You've got the renewables, the wind, the solar. They do not replace transportation fuel. And 70% of all the oil used every day in the world goes to transportation fuel. So you have to get something that's going to stand off with the oil to reduce the imports of oil. Today, we're paying $1.5 billion a day for imported oil. 2/3 of our trade deficit. That's not sustainable either. But nobody ever speaks to that. They just go along. If you go back over presidents from Nixon forward, Nixon said in '70, at the end of this decade, we will not import any oil. At that point in '70, we imported 24%. At the end of the decade, we imported 28%. He never spoke to the question again over his period in office. You have one right after the other. They all say the same thing. Elect me and we'll be energy independent. Nobody ever says, a couple of years in, we're at that point now with the president, but nobody ever says, you told us. And what Obama told us when he received the nomination in July of '08, he said in 10 years, we will not import any oil from the Mideast. Very clearly. In the fourth debate, Bob Schieffer and I had lunch the week before, and he said, what energy question would you ask these guys? I said, ask them how long we're going to import oil from the enemy. He said, that's a little bit raw. I don't know whether I could get away with that or not. But he did ask them about imported oil, and Obama said exactly the same thing. In 10 years, we will not import any oil from the Mideast. Okay, now we're 3 years into that period, and I've never seen anybody say, you said that in 10 years, how are we coming on your plan to cut off oil from the Mideast? Nobody ever asked him the question, and it doesn't happen. So I'm in a place where I'm talking to people in the press and everything. One of you, please, ask the president. Okay, can we get it fixed? We can. We've got 4,000 trillion cubic feet of natural gas that converted to oil, barrels of oil equivalent, 700 billion barrels of oil, which is 3 times what the Saudis have. 3 times. And we do not have one politician that has said, we may not be as bad off as we think we are on energy. We have plenty of energy here. We can take care of ourselves. It can all happen. It can all be fixed. Natural gas is cleaner, it's cheaper, it's abundant, it's ours, and why not? Okay, we're going to use dirty imported oil from OPEC, and now they're talking about exporting our natural gas. Okay, we're going to send the clean, cheap stuff out and take the dirty from the enemy. We're starting to border on not looking very smart. Stupid is about where we are. I mean, we have resources that can solve the problem, and we still do not have any movement. Is it this president's fault? It's the last 10 presidents' fault. Not a one have ever done anything. Now, this president is starting to talk about natural gas, if you noticed. He even used my name in his last energy speech, that this legendary oil man, Boone Pickens, is working on this deal. My wife shook hands with the president, and this was Las Vegas before he was elected, but he said to her, your husband is working hard for the energy problem that the United States faces. So, we're in communication, sort of. He doesn't call me up much, but I'm always available. Okay, you've heard my problem. It is a security issue with us. On green, Ted is a little bit brighter green than I am. I'm green. If you gave me a saliva test for environmentalists, I'll pass. I can, but my primary focus is on the energy security for America. And I'm all American. I'll take anything here in America. Somebody say, oh my God, you'll take coal? Yeah, I'll take anything American in place of OPEC oil. Thank you.
So before I start asking questions, Ted, did you have any immediate response to anything Boone had to say there?
We don't agree about everything. but we agree mostly.
Well, why don't you tell us what you don't agree on? We'd be curious to hear about that.
Well, I'm a little I'm a little greener and a little cleaner.
That's right.
And I don't think we ought to export the coal. I think we ought to just cap it and let it sit there. What we need for hydrocarbons for plastics anyway in time. In fact, our children would look back on us and say, what'd they burn all their hydrocarbons up for when we needed it for building blocks? It's a lot more valuable to be used to build things than it is to burn. And the sun, once again, is sitting there free every day, just going to waste. We've got solar, works like a charm. The technology's already here, and so is the wind technology. And if we spend more on research and get and start really implementing wind and solar and geothermal too, I'm a strong believer in it. We're going to develop a better technology like we have in computers, and it'll be even more efficient.
Could I
In my
interject
opinion.
something here? That on cost of kilowatt hour, the most expensive is solar, $6,300 a kilowatt hour. Second, if you can believe it, because we've changed how we have to clean up coal, it's moved up to $5,300. Then you drop to $2,400 for wind, $2,400 kilowatt hour. Then you drop to $1,500 for natural gas. So you know where, I mean, we're capitalists. I mean, we're trying to find the cheapest deal that we can and make the most money off of it. That's what capitalism is. Anything wrong with it? No. But it's, you know, you're going to look at it on cost. I tried to build the biggest wind farm that had ever been built, 1,000 megawatts. But all at once, that wind is priced off the margin. The margin, energy, power, is the price is natural gas. So wind gets natural gas price. Well, natural gas, at the time that I said build the biggest wind farm, natural gas was $8. Today it's $4. It's $4. $6 I have to finance that wind farm. So now I made a deal with GE 4 years ago, and I bought the turbines, and they're starting to be delivered, and my garage really isn't big enough to take 500 turbines in it. So it's now I'm going to build a wind farm. Will be built in Ontario, Canada, and Minnesota is where it'll happen. Not in the Panhandle of Texas where I wanted to, but there I didn't get the transmission either. They promised transmission, and they never delivered it. I'd like to leave you with this point, but 1 MCF of natural gas, that's $4, is equal to, energy-wise, it'll do the same thing. And know this, the only thing that's going to move an 18-wheeler is going to be either diesel or natural gas. A battery will not move an 18-wheeler. So somebody said, well, what are our options? That's it. The only one we have that's going to replace foreign oil to move the 18-wheeler is natural gas. But 1 MCF of natural gas for $4 equal 7 gallons of diesel. 7 gallons of diesel is $30. So here, the cleaner, cheaper compared to the foreign, dirty diesel, you're talking about the cost to be 25% of it. Now, you got to do some compression, and there's some other factors that go into it. But today, if you had an 18-wheeler, you bought a new one, and you bought a natural gas one instead of a diesel one, your fuel would be $1.50 a gallon cheaper. That is overpowering. Next question to me is, well, why, if it's so cheap, why in the hell doesn't it work without passing H.R. 1380? Because I want direction. I want this president to say, this is where we're going. This is what we're going to do. We are going to get on our own resources, and this is the way it's going to work. We're going to take the 8 million 18-wheelers, and we're going to induce them to do that with a little help. And this is all the help I want. I want $1 billion a year for 5 years, and then kill it. The program is over. It sunsets and out. $5 billion. Well, that's a lot of money, Boone. Yeah, but we got 8 million vehicles here. And so they would go $60,000 for a tax credit, because incremental difference in those vehicles is 60,000. So don't make your truckers pay to be patriotic, but let them, it'll be a hurry-up program is what will happen, because $1 billion a year will only get you, at the end of 5 years, 143,000 trucks. Well, now, Boone, you can't even figure. You don't even have enough money to do the job. I don't have to have the money, but get it started. Just give me the money to get it started. Give us the direction, Mr. President, and we'll go in that direction, because we are patriotic people and we're not stupid. We can save $1.50 a gallon, get a little help on the, just to get it kicked off. We can go. All of this is going to happen, though. I made another speech. Sorry.
We got plenty of time. Just curious, how do you refuel those trucks?
Same, basically.
infrastructure.
Okay, infrastructure. The way it's worked, I have a model for everything I do. I don't do R&D. R takes 10 years, D takes 10 years, and that puts me over the line. So I've got to go with something that works. So I look to California because they've dealt with air quality issues there, you know, for 20, 30 years. And South Coast Air Quality Management District has air quality issues in Southern California. And the guy that runs it, Barry Wallerstein, is a smart guy, and he now has to reduce his emissions in Southern California. So he said, who are my biggest polluters? Trash trucks, because they work 24/7, they idle a lot, and so they have an inefficient burn. What's the incremental cost difference? $50,000. $50,000 more for the, now that's narrowed in 7 years to $12,000. On scale, it narrows. He said, okay, we have plenty of money, give them $50,000. When they buy a new one, they have to buy natural gas, but they do not have to get rid of their diesel. When they do get rid of their diesel, one diesel taken off the streets in Southern California is equal to 325 cars. Okay, one 18-wheeler taken off the highway is equal to 1,600 cars on emissions. It's that much cleaner. So Wallerstein says, let's do it. Now, Southern California, trash trucks, natural gas. All trash trucks built in the United States this year, 75% of them will be on natural gas. That was all started by the California model 7 years ago. So I know it works, and so infrastructure will come with the trucks. Yeah, that's a business in and of itself. You don't need to have the government build any filling stations. Can you imagine, go back, Henry Ford, when he said Model T Ford, everybody's going to have one. They're all going to be the same car. Going to be black, and they're the same, and that's it. And they said, Mr. Ford, do you realize we have no filling stations? Oh, hell, we can't do it then. Hell, just forget the idea. It was a bad idea. So, you know, maybe a little inconvenience, maybe it is, but I'm not asking for your car. I'm just talking about these 8 million. What do the 8 million do for you? In 7 years, it's 2.5 million barrels a day. It cuts OPEC in half, cuts them in half. We get 5 million a day off of them, and we're paying for both sides of the war. Jim Woolsey had a great op-ed piece April 9th of 2010, Wall Street Journal. And in it, he said, we are paying for both sides of the war. And I truly believe that is the case. We don't look very smart doing that.
Ted, I don't want to preclude you from speaking. Is there anything you have to add to any of that there?
I don't like war either, particularly paying for it, and particularly losing. I mean, what if we won in Afghanistan and Iraq? I want to know. And what are we going to win in Libya? The last time we won a war was World War II, because that's the last time anybody surrendered to us. Not even Grenada surrendered. Vietnam didn't surrender. I mean, you don't win unless the other side admits that they were beaten.
Boy, listen, Ted, I agree with you 100% on this point. We ought to get those people out of Afghanistan.
That'd save us a lot of money right there.
Damn right.
Let's next time send scientists and engineers and doctors and maybe a few lawyers over to help out rather than send soldiers. Bombs never did any good.
Well, let me ask a few questions that we have from our audience, and I'll be paraphrasing them in the interest of time and perhaps to be concise. So, you're both essentially unhappy with the status quo, and as you described it, Boone, I think we're going back at least 40 years there. Have there been structural or political impediments toward getting these reforms in place? Does it have to do with how campaigns are financed? Why is it that it's taken till perhaps this year, with your prediction the Pickens Plan will be approved this year, that we haven't weaned ourselves off of foreign oil?
You go back, it's two reasons. Believe it or not, I am brief on answers, but it's two things. I mean, your leadership in Washington did not understand the problem or did not feel it was important enough to pursue. And second, you had cheap oil. Cheap oil is what is, and I've been with the Saudis and had conversation with them, and they say to me, if you come up with alternatives, we'll lower the price of oil, and your alternatives, you can't finance them. They said that to me. Well, I believe it. I've seen it over the years. That's exactly what they do. But we don't come up with anything. We could have some control over our energy future if we just understood what's the situation. We don't have time to address that problem. We have cheap oil.
Ted? What's keeping reform from taking place? Is it America's hunger for cheap oil?
I really think that the oil and coal lobbies who are holding the hill and got all the money have done a masterful job of confusing everybody. I go to bed at night praying for clean coal, and I know there is no such thing, but I've seen so many ads for it that that they're persuading me that it's possible. Almost. No, we were outgunned. If President Obama, I think this is the biggest mistake I've seen him make yet, and I like him. If he had just taken the energy and climate change bill and put it first before health care, we'd have gotten it through. We were ready. He just spent all his political capital. It got to be more contentious than we thought, and there wasn't. We didn't have the strength. And then the coal and the oil industry counterattacked with their ad campaign, and then the solar and wind industries ran out of money and couldn't match them, and we just got beat. And we've got to be really careful because this law that was just upheld that corporations can spend all the money they want to on political campaigns, that really worries me that we may lose our democracy. I mean, we're close to losing it now. And it really worries me. I don't think the government's supposed to serve the people, but it's not. It is not serving the people's best interest. If it was, we'd have clean energy right now. We'd be doing the smart things rather than the dumb things. And I'm really, really worried about it. I keep hoping that things will get better, but this last that law letting the corporations spend whatever they want to. I mean, like the Koch brothers in Kansas. I mean, they're two smart guys. They're in the coal and oil business big time, and they spend millions. The Heritage Foundation. I mean, they're kicking our butts, and we can't continue to let it happen without serious negative consequences, which we're already experiencing.
So,
could I add something?
Please.
Yeah, the Koch interest and also the Heritage Foundation are not for me. I can tell you that.
Well, I didn't say they were.
Oh, I know you didn't. No, I'm throwing in with you.
Hey.
Yeah. Okay.
We're together on most issues.
Yeah. Those guys are sure not helping me.
I'm happy with natural gas in our 18-wheelers.
But the major oil companies, see them for what they are. They're international oil companies. Take Exxon, for instance. Is it a good company? Of course it is. Is it well run? Absolutely. They work for shareholders. They do not work for America. They are an international company. 84% of the revenues come from offshore. And our President Bush last, I mean, they were one of his biggest advisors on energy in America. That's not who you go to for energy in America. You go to energy experts in America, not an international oil company. Doesn't make sense.
So another question, which I'll throw first to Mr. Pickens. A recent report from the Cornell scholars found that hydraulic fracturing to mine natural gas may result in excess greenhouse gas emissions, possibly worse than coal. If true, how does this change the plan to use natural gas as a bridge fuel?
Well, that's the only person I've ever heard that said that coal was cleaner than natural gas. So it almost refutes the whole thing, because there's no question that natural gas is cleaner. Natural gas was the fuel that cleaned up California. Some of you are old enough. I am. Ted, you're not. And but you flew into Los Angeles and you could see it, and you say, oh my God, it got a bad smog today in Los Angeles. I mean, it was just yellow brown. That's all been cleaned up with natural gas. 2,800 buses in the LAMTA is on natural gas. It's the largest bus fleet in the United States, been on for 20 years. The largest bus fleet in the world is Beijing Transit, 5,700 buses. Does it work? Of course it works. It is cleaner. I know that Cornell deal, I don't know who paid him to do that, but well, I'm serious. The guy's he's got a half a dozen things in there in that report. I didn't read the whole thing, but he's got a half a dozen things there. I've never seen anybody to end with those conclusions that he ends with in that deal. So there'll be people that'll look at it. I believe it's MIT saw that they responded, and they didn't think much of it. But it's I don't know who paid him to do the study. It's a place to go.
Well, Ted mentioned earlier that he wishes that the environmental downside of natural gas extraction could be better addressed. So,
okay,
what about that?
Okay, you're talking about the fracking, hydrofracking?
Yes.
The first frack job I ever saw was in 1953 at Borger, Texas. In 1957, I fracked my first well. From 1957 until now, I've fracked over 3,000 wells. I've never had one well I had any problem. What he's talking about as being the problem is the well is drilled down. Freshwater sands occur in the upper 1,000 feet of the hole. This hole is drilled to 1,000 feet. They run a string of casing, cement back to the surface, and close it off. I worked in an area where Ogallala sand is the biggest aquifer in North America, which is from Midland, Texas, to the South Dakota border, across 8 states. And I drilled over 3,000 wells in that area, so we were very conscious of the Ogallala. Cemented off, drill down 10,000, 12,000, 15,000 feet, whatever. Here you are down here, and you complete the well there. Well, you're 2 to 3 miles below the freshwater sand. You tell me how a frack job 2 miles down can get back up into that freshwater sand. I never had it happen. I know of nobody else ever having it happen. If you notice, all the complaints are coming from Pennsylvania, and that's in the Marcellus. How long have you been developing the Marcellus? About 3 years. You've been drilled over 800,000 wells in Oklahoma, Kansas, Texas, and fracked those wells. And I do not know of any lawsuit or any complaint or anything else about that. Why is it all right there? And also in Western New York. Western New York is concerned about it. They now have said, you're going to frack these wells in the watershed. What? The watershed? They don't even know what the watershed is. That's where it rains. It rains in the watershed and then runs into a lake. And you're not going to frack the lake or the watershed or whatever. You're fracking down 10,000 feet, 2 miles under the surface. But my God, said the people in New York, they don't know what's going to happen to their water. Well, what they need is somebody intelligent, a leader to say, this is what the deal is. Don't worry, just watch what I'm telling you, listen to what I'm saying, and check the facts. That's all you have to do. It's not complicated. It's very simple. You got people going around, oh my God, you hydrofracked wells you did for 50 years? Yeah, I did. My God, how do you feel about yourself? I feel just like I did yesterday. I didn't. Getting old. And
Ted, are you as confident as Boone is about the environmental
He knows
aspects
a
of this?
lot more about it than I do, because he's an oil man. I was a TV man.
TV man. I trust you guys, Ted. Do you trust us?
I trust you.
Do you believe that climate change, I'll go to Ted first on this, do you believe that climate change is an actual phenomenon, and if so, how do you react to recent polls showing that fewer Americans believe it to be a real problem?
Fewer than what? One before?
Well, I don't know what the questioner meant by that, but in other words,
Well, but that's-
the initial part is, how serious do you believe the problem is with climate change?
I think it's a life or death issue. I study, I'm a real expert when it comes to nature, and if the temperature goes up 4, 5, 6 degrees Fahrenheit, it'll make life on Earth very difficult for most of the creatures, including humans.
Boone, how do you feel about it?
Well, I'm a geologist, and we can take you back in time millions of years where you had drought that would extend over long periods, even maybe a million years. We've had ice ages that were hundreds of thousands of years. So we know that temperature can remain constant or fluctuate or whatever. But believe it or not, I'm one of the few geologists that believes in climate change. I think you, me, all of us, we've screwed up a lot of what our emissions into the ozone, and that is and so they say, well, how do you approach it? I don't think it's going to happen real quick, and it kind of is like, what's the problem on energy in America? We had cheap oil. Well, here you've had climate change, but you don't have, if your cheap oil had run up to $200 a barrel, I can tell you something would have happened. Somebody would have figured out a better way than that. And on climate change, it doesn't go up fast enough. It goes along and you say, well, is this some part of the change or what? And you're out 10 years, 20 years or whatever. But I'm ready to take measures to restrict emissions into the atmosphere, one, and because if I'm wrong, I didn't hurt myself. Just say I went out and spent a few bucks trying to help this, and we find out 20 years from now there isn't any climate change phenomenon. There's none of it. It wasn't so. Well, I didn't do something that hurt maybe a few bucks, but I didn't do anything wrong. But if I go out 20 years and I'm keep saying climate change doesn't mean anything, I get out here 20 years and I think, oh my God, it did mean something, and I let 20 years get past me and I didn't do anything about it. So back again, I hate to set up these things that make all of us look stupid. And I feel stupid sometimes about the way things go. And I think, why do you let them go? Why do you let it happen? Well, I'm not in any role of leadership. I can't stop these things. How can I do it? But Ted, he's a leader. He stepped up. Well, I put up, and you said $62 million. I spent 82 on this, and $82 million. It'll get you something. Somebody said, "Have you gotten your money's worth?" I will when I pass HR 1380. I'll feel like I got my money's worth. But but Ted he's been on this, and I didn't agree with him. And we talked 10 years ago, and I said, "I'm not going for this climate change stuff." Well, I do now. I'm ready to throw in.
Just curious, other than talking to Ted, what changed your mind?
Well, I'm pretty interested in polar bears too, and that ice cap is sure disappearing fast, and so I don't go for the funny weather in the country, because I can remember when we had tornadoes and we had flooding and all kinds of things. But the way that ice is disappearing fast, and I've had some experience up in Alaska and all, and you look at those glaciers and see what's happened up there, and it's getting warm where that ice is, and it's not normal, I don't think. Okay.
Here's a question for Mr. Turner. You have a partnership to build solar energy plants with Southern Company. Can you, or are you planning to do it without federal government subsidies, or are the subsidies necessary to get it going?
Depends on the situation, but there does need to be some subsidies. Remember, right now, we're subsidizing coal and oil big time. Over the years, they've gotten all sorts of economic subsidies in there, and wind and solar and geothermal are not being subsidized because they weren't here to get in line and get their spot at the feed trough. So it really is a leveling. In a totally level playing field, wind and solar and geothermal have a much better chance than they do with the subsidies all stacked up against them on the fossil fuel industry. We're subsidizing the wrong thing, but we did it over the 200 years of the Industrial Revolution. We've been giving them breaks all the way along. Depletion being one of them, and not having the polluting industries pay the health care costs of society that society in general is paying rather than the polluter paying. And I think the polluter should be doing the paying. If they were, then clean renewable energy would be competitive.
If you look at where the most wind energy and the most solar energy is, does you know where it is, Mark?
In the Midwest?
No, it's Germany.
Okay.
Germany, they don't even have wind or sun. They really don't. They're not big on either one. But think with me just a second. You know where Germany gets their natural gas from?
Russia.
Right, Russia. Let me tell you, I was around, I was young, but I remember Stalingrad and Leningrad. There were 5 million people killed there. And there's about 3 million Germans and 2 million Russians. I can tell you those people in Russia and Germany remember that, and a lot more of it. And the Germans do not want to get too dependent on the Russians. They do take gas from them. They take gas from them. But they went in and subsidized wind and solar and paid a hell of a price for it. But that's what they thought of security. And that's my pitch here, is we have a security issue with OPEC oil, and we don't even address it, but they did. And it's interesting because we ran some of those ads, some of you may have remembered, but it showed the globe, and all the lights are on all over the globe, and then said, and then one day somebody doesn't have gas, and clicked off Eastern Europe on that globe, and it was on, that's part of the 82 million I spent on. Guess who comes to see me? Gazprom. And sat down and told me what a great job I was doing, and they liked everything I was doing, except one thing, that on that ad, you are cutting off our service area. I said, I know, I meant to. And but here they are. I mean, they don't like it. They do not like it. And they watch this stuff that I put up 2 weeks after we launched the Pickens Plan. I was at the Democrat convention, and that's a true story. They don't remember I was a Republican. But I got out of politics. I went to the Democrat convention, which really surprised a lot of people. I never had been to a Democrat convention in my life. They're a bunch of nice people. But anyway, I'm there, and my wife was born in Kirkuk, Iraq. And her mother's Lebanese and father English, and immigrated to the United States when she was 18 years old. But she has friends because from that part of the world and all, and she got a call from a friend wanting us to go to dinner that night. And so we went to dinner, and I thought it would probably be 15 or 20 people. Ambassador was there and all. And it wasn't. It was 5. And the first question was asked me after we shook hands and said hi, and they said, "What is your Pickens Plan?" And I thought, well, let's see how this goes over. I said, "I want to get off of your oil." But I smiled when I said it, and said, "But we're friends." I said, "I know," but I said, "We need to get on our own resources." But they were watching that close. I announced that right here on July the 8th, 2008 at the Press Club. In 2 weeks, they were asking me, "What is this plan?" Well, hell yes, they could see what I was going to do is I was going to get on our resources and get off of their oil, is what it was. So anyway.
So you both earlier talked about sort of the inability of our policymakers and our leaders to forge an effective energy policy. Just yesterday, pretty big headline that Standard & Poor's essentially warned that the U.S. is at risk of not forging a adequate solution to the deficit. And of course, in the near term, the debt ceiling is looming. How do you feel about how Washington is managing the financial situation in the United States right now, Ted?
I'm not happy with it. I'm not happy. I'm concerned. I mean, when your credit rating is downgraded, and I think that's what happened yesterday, that's not good.
They warned on the outlook, which was a longer term sort of thing, but that's sort of along the road to downgrading the credit rating. Do you think that Republicans and Democrats are going to be able to come together and find a solution?
I'm not comfortable with the way the parties are getting along with each other. I'm concerned about our ability to compromise and run our country in an intelligent, forward-thinking manner.
Boone, what do you think?
I think they are doing a fabulous job. They're working so well together. They act like they're not, but I know they really are. Do you feel that way? No. Okay.
I'm not here to express my opinion.
And I'm not a fool either.
Yeah.
But no, I agree with Ted. I try to limit myself to my subject, and I feel like I can represent that I'm 5 feet wide and 50 feet deep on one subject. And I think that Congress has accepted me that way. They realize that I'm a serious person with a serious plan, and I have both sides that call me and ask me about energy questions. What do you think about this or that? And I made a speech last week in Marion County, California, and I was asked there, said, "You're in a county here where the people are very liberal, and how do you think," there were 3,000 of them there, and they said, "What do you think, how do you think they view you?" I said, "I think they view me as a patriotic old man with a good idea." And I got big applause for it. So, but I do think I'm viewed that way, and that's the way I want to be.
Ted, of course, everybody knows you perhaps originally as the founder of CNN. That's an organization that's gone through a lot of changes in recent years. You told me earlier that you still prefer to watch it. How do you feel about CNN as an enterprise these days?
Well, I wish they went in for more serious news and more international news like they used to. But then, remember, I'm an old geezer too, and I'm not there anymore. And there's nothing worse than asking somebody in my position what they think of the way the company that they used to run is being run today. It's not really fair.
Let me comment.
Absolutely, please.
Let me tell you, I wrote Ted a note. He probably doesn't remember it, but I wrote him a note one time years ago, and I said, "Ted Turner, you've done more to open up the world than anybody I've ever seen." And, you showed people all over the world how we lived and what opportunities they would have if they had a democracy and all. But you the guy that showed the world what the world really looked like.
What do you think about that when you hear somebody like Boone Pickens say something like that?
Makes me feel good.
That's good. That's good. And on the other side of the television equation, you've had some not always kind words to say about the perceived competition to CNN, which includes Fox News. Do you sometimes sample across the media landscape to watch that? How do you feel about Rupert Murdoch and News Corporation and the job that Fox News does?
I think he's done a real good job with the Wall Street Journal. You know, he's a little far right for me on the television side, you know, at Fox News. But, you know, that's me. You know, I think they've got every right to do it, and it's not, doesn't seem to be irresponsible. It's responsible.
And I'll just say, since you gentlemen are no strangers to the news business, and this was a return trip to the National Press Club, just briefly, how do you feel like you're treated by the news business as a news subject?
Me?
Yeah.
I feel fine.
Yeah. Well, we're glad to hear that. Boone?
Well, if I could write the articles, I'd write them a little different. But having said that, I think they treat me very fairly, but they're better as I've gotten older. I mean, they used to jump on my ass pretty bad, you know. But I've gotten older now, and they introduced me, you know, as legendary oil man. I thought about that, and that's you notice most articles say T. Boone Pickens, legendary oil man. What's that legendary? What's that mean? You know what that is? That's a guy 75 years old and still has a job.
That's a good thing. That's a good thing.
But I'm 82, though.
God bless you. Well, we are almost out of time. Before we ask the last question of our two speakers, a couple of housekeeping guests to take care of. First of all, I'd like to remind our guests about some upcoming luncheon speakers. On May 16th, General James Jones, former National Security Advisor, former Marine Corps Commandant, among his offices, will be our speaker. On May 20th, a lot going on with organized labor these days. Richard Trumka, president of AFL-CIO, will speak. And then Juan Williams, May 26th, with Fox News contributor. You might recall we had Vivian Schiller here before she lost her job with NPR earlier this year, and Juan Williams will sort of deliver a rebuttal, so to speak. Next up on our regular order of business, I'd like to present both of our guests with the traditional NPC coffee mug. So Boone, there you go.
Thank you.
And Ted. So you're collecting a set now, so we're grateful for that. Next, of course, is the last question, and there's another wealthy individual these days who's making the rounds, and that is Donald Trump, and he seems to be flirting with the notion of running for president. What advice would you give him? Ted?
Good luck.
I've got to tell you,
let anybody, the more the merrier. Maybe we'll find somebody that'll shake things up.
Would you vote for him?
I know him. I kind of like him, to tell you the truth. I mean, you know, he's colorful.
You have that in common. Boone, what do you think about Donald Trump?
well, I know him too, but he was on CNBC ahead of me the other day. We were both on satellite, and he was telling about how to solve an energy problem for America. And he said, let me tell you, he said, the way to handle that OPEC crowd, he said, you tell them what you're going to pay them for the oil. You tell them, if you want to pay $50 a barrel, tell them it's $50 a barrel and send us the oil. It's interesting approach, you know, and so I came on after him, and I said, Donald, I'll tell you what, if you won't say anything more about energy, I won't ever mention real estate.
How about a round of applause for our speakers today?
Thank you.
Thank you for coming today. I'd like to thank the National Press Club staff, including our Library and Broadcast Center, for organizing the event. And again, you can find more information about the club at www.press.org. Thank you, and we're adjourned.
That was great. It was a lot of fun. Nice job.